Welcome back, guys, to another episode of The Trek Way. Mr. Grey Gamer and myself, Trev. Hello. This is the season
Howdy,
of
howdy.
specials. Right.
Yes,
Kind
and if we do a really good job, we'll be renewed for a second season.
of, well, I don't know. They're cutting costs and streaming services and whatnot,
Yeah,
so
that's
I don't know
right.
if they can afford this, Grey. The CGI is top notch, and
Yeah,
yeah, too much money involved.
we really look so much like our real selves. It's unbelievable.
Deep fakes. Deep fakes.
Deep fakes, yeah.
Grey's really 20 years old, and I'm really 60, so
Yeah,
they're
it's
using
gonna
deep
flip
fakes.
around. You'll be gray haired, and I'll.
uh, I like doing specials. We don't get to do them as often because we're busy with our lives and other podcasts, and usually because there's a weekly review to do, isn't there?
It's a
So
weekly show, yeah.
yeah, we decided to just do kind of best solve. I'm not saying we'll do best solve every week. Like mix it up and do something a bit more deep or different next week. But certainly, today we thought we'd do another
Well,
top five because it was a great suggestion on what we're talking about, Gray.
yeah, we got a whole load of suggestions, but we this one kind of hit our fancy for today.
Yeah. Uh,
So,
and what is it for? What's the subject? Choice of
best
subject today.
engineers, Star Trek, best engineers, ranked from 5 to 1, and some special mentions,
The usual,
like
yeah,
we always
special
do.
mention, yeah, which are always funny. Now, 4 out of 5 of these we've got the exact same engineer, which maybe it's just great minds think alike. But the curveball is the fifth choice,
I yeah, I
which
had
is
to throw a
different.
curveball somewhere.
Yeah, I doubt you were going to select the same as me, mate. To be fair, but I mean, I'm curious to see what our choices are. And to be fair, even though we've selected the same for a lot of the other guys, we'll have different opinions and stuff on them. And people, if you want to comment below on your top five or your top three and why, if you agree or disagree with our points, and getting the paperwork out the way before we start. Of course, don't forget, Mr. Gray over here has Gray's Green Room entertainment podcast once a month, which is on the YouTube and audio podcast platforms at Gray's Green Room, and he's on Twitter at Gray's
Mhm.
Green Room. But I do more on his Twitter than he does on his Twitter sometimes. So you make it me. You get Gray's Green Room. Who knows? And
And Trev is on it. He's either over here or over there, depending on which side.
somewhere. And yeah, of course, we're on YouTube, as you know, on the podcasting platforms as well, and at the Trekway. No, sorry. Yeah, on the Trekway at Twitter. Got a bit confused there. It's been a long
Yeah.
day. And last but not least, gaming side of things. We love the gaming side of things. We also hang out, do a gaming podcast once a week on a Thursday, with the exception of tonight, with our friend Nick, on the YouTube again at Extreme PC UK, and same with the Twitter as well. So likes are always below, but yeah. I'm not going to ask for a like. I'm just all going to ask for a comment below in your top three. How about that? Top three engineers and why, and if we're talking
Yeah.
crap or not. You know. Okay. Let's start with fifth choice. I'm fascinated by this one because I don't have a fecking clue who he is. Great. Who's your fifth choice best engineer and why?
I thought I would just kind of throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing, and I put Niles Pitcairn in the
Pitcairn.
crickets come.
Pitcairn.
So Pitcairn, or however you want to pronounce it, Niles was the chief engineer on the USS Enterprise under Christopher Pike, Captain Christopher Pike, in The Cage, which was the pilot
For one
that came
bloody
out,
episode.
more or less. Now, here's the thing: this is canon and non-canon at the same time.
Yeah.
So why do I say that? Canon is that back then during The Cage, he was the transporter chief. That's how they addressed him, and they were assuming that transporter chief meant he was chief engineer. They didn't really get into what the chief engineer eventually became. He was the transporter chief, so that
Yeah.
he was looked at as being the chief engineer, but without saying that. Now, in non-canon, they identified the fact that yes, he was chief engineer or became chief engineer soon after he left the role of transporter chief. He became chief engineer of the Enterprise under Pike. Now, they don't say because I don't think anybody's really addressed it as to whether canon or non-canon when he was the chief engineer, because obviously as we see Strange New Worlds, we saw that apparently Hemmer was the chief engineer, and then of course you've probably seen the series by now. It's been a while. He died, and now there's going to be a new chief
He did.
engineer, right? So now I'm trying to think. So the new chief engineer, will his name be Niles Pitcairn? or will it be a different chief engineer? And where does he fit in, or
Good
will fit
point.
in the whole thing on Strange New Worlds? Because there was a guy there. At the very least, he would have to be transporter chief on Strange New Worlds, and they have to use his name because that part is canon. So this is going to be interesting if they ever do address a transporter chief slash chief engineer. Will it be this guy?
Why did they not go straight into him, do you think? I mean, I love Hemmer, great character, but why do you think they didn't go
I
right
mean,
into him?
I believe if I'm remember correctly, Pike did 2 runs of 5 years, right? I think so. He did something like 10, 11 years on the Enterprise. So in that time period, he could have had more than one chief engineer. That's always possible.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Few of them even.
Um, right, and already that he has because the guy died. So maybe that's a bad job to have on the under Pike. The engineers don't seem to last. They either die or they leave. I don't know what. So I just thought I would throw that in there because going all the way back to the beginning, the cage, which if you don't know by now, shame on you, but basically the cage was the first pilot that the network at that time, NBC, to make a decision whether they wanted to go ahead with Star Trek. And what happened was they liked it, but they wanted to make a change or two, and they wanted to know if Roddenberry would do a second pilot. And he did a second pilot, and that one was with Shatner because they couldn't get Jeffrey Hunter because he was already, promised out on stuff.
Yeah.
And the second pilot they liked a little better, and then it became TOS, and there you go. So
Yeah.
that's my weird pick of the five that I had to do.
So if Niles is in just one episode, as far as we're concerned, but I guess so the question would be, why did you pick him? Because it's a bit unique, it's a bit different. Because I mean,
Yeah,
there's no right or
unique.
wrong answer, Gray. But I'm just curious
Yeah,
why one episode.
I just went with the fact that it was the very first, even before Kirk, even though Spock was in it at that time. Um, and I just felt that it would be kind of an interesting pick since it was the very first. And that's pretty much the only reason. I mean, your choice coming up is probably the more logical one, but I didn't go for it because I didn't see enough of that show.
Fair enough. Fair enough. With further ado, my my fifth choice, top ranked Starfleet engineer is Charles Tucker the third, aka Trip, and I watch him and Malcolm Reed. I can't remember the actor that plays him on the Shuttlepod show. They do the production in that is phenomenal, and the amount of guests they get in, it's real enjoyable. It's probably the best fan show. Like I would point you in the direction of I might even put a link below for those guys because they get all the Picard crew in there and whatnot. So yeah, Charlie Boy Trip. Again, some people might go, "Why are you nuts? What are you smoking? Why is he in the list?" And it is a curveball, yes, but also there is a lot of logic behind it. This focus and this camera is shocking today. Let me get back. There we
I thought it
go.
was me. I thought I was
No,
tripping.
no. It wasn't the pills you took, mate. It was definitely
Okay.
on me. Um,
So
yeah,
they call Charles Chuckler Trip because he either is real clumsy or because he was into the mushrooms or something.
I can't remember the reason. They might have actually said on the show why you gave that nickname. Tucker, I guess, would you be called Tuck? Is your nickname? Maybe. I don't know. Uh,
I mean, Trip and Tucker really open your name up to some bad stuff. But
uh,
hey,
so Gray didn't watch enough of Enterprise, and I keep saying to him he needs to keep watching it because gets better later on, just like Discovery gets better the longer it goes on. And you think he would trust my opinion by now, but he's got lots of stuff to watch ahead of that, I guess.
well, it's
Uh,
not like I didn't watch any. I mean,
you
I
watch
made it
some,
about
but you watch the kind of poorer part. That's about it. It starts off slow and a bit meh and gets slowly better until the end you're like, what? They've cancelled it now. It was getting good.
yeah, well, that
That's
was
what
the
it is.
problem. They should have concentrated more on the writing, made it good sooner,
Yeah.
and maybe it would have
Eh,
lasted longer. But they lost a lot of people at the very open of the show. That's the bad
The,
part.
the,
The open is so bad.
the theme music's shocking. That they should never be singing in Star Trek music ever. I mean, that was a joke in the Shuttlepod show. They're like, "Oh, I loved your." In Picard season 3, they brought back the TNG theme, and
Mm,
the guy that plays Trip went, there was no singing in it, no words. Like, what the hell? And he's being facetious and very dry,
yeah.
and just Jonathan Frakes had a chuckle at that one. So, um, No, the very first episode of Enterprise, Broken Bow, I loved the concept of that. They were trying to launch a bit quicker, and they grabbed this Klingon, the first kind of other alien they bumped into, major species, alien species, and they had to get him back. And this kicks off the whole Klingon kind of human war thing. And I love the concept of it. Generally, very raw Enterprise with not half the technology that you expect in modern Trek. Just like Gray says, if the writing had been a bit better, could have been.
Mm.
But anyway, so the reason I go with Trip is he's a very, very important man. He is the first major chief engineer of a Warp 5 engine in commission in the field place. You know, he's actually the first main engineer, and it's the first proper production Warp 5 engine from the Warp 5 facility. And that's a big deal because you remember your Trek history, they've been going Warp 2, 1, 2, and so forth for quite a while. And while that got them about the solar system and the region relatively easy, getting further afield was a bit of a trek. You had the cargo ships that I remember forget all their bloody names, that the pilot of the ship was on for a while, and he grew up in the cargo ships, and they would be Warp 1 all the time, and it would literally take forever to get anywhere, even at that speed, because Warp 1 is just the speed of light, and that's it. So you're going to the other side of the Alpha Quadrant, you're like, let's sign up for a year or a few years,
Right.
like 5-year missions again, because it takes so long. And then he gets to go on to the Enterprise for the first time, and he's like, I've got a Warp 5 engine, hell yes, let's go. And they can't, thing is though, they can't get it to, there's points where I don't know if you recall this, great, but they try to, they're trying to outrun, I think, the Klingons, and the captain just says, right, gun it, like, let's go to Warp 5, and Pip's like, I don't know if we want to be pushing engines that hard, Captain, and he's like, it is a Warp 5 engine for a purpose, and he's like, on paper. So this is the first time of trying to coax it out more. I mean, you see this first Warp 5 engine. You see this up until the original movies, actually. So it's not vertical like you're expecting. It's horizontal, and that's where it starts. It starts in the NX class starships. This long Warp 5 engine. It's very hands-on with knobs and switches and stuff. Some of the things he does. Like there was an episode I told Gray where he's going between one ship to the other NX class ship, and he's going between them with a ladder while it's at warp. There's one warp bubble holding the two ships together, and he is going to do he's going to do basically a cold start of the warp hinges, which has never been tried before ever in Star Trek. He was the first one to do it, and he doesn't quite know what's going to happen. He knows what's going to happen in theory, so he's like running about. There's sparks going everywhere. He's flicking switches and blah blah. And I was in awe at this. I was like, he is the original. He's the first. And I know you could have arguments about the original series, but chronologically, I think it deserves its place there. And the guy had a bit of he was a funny guy. He had brilliant. His line was "Keep your shirt on." It was very, so Malcolm Reed would take the piss out of him with the English accent. He'd be like, keep your shirt on, Lieutenant. And he'd take the piss out of him because he was Trip is a higher rank than Malcolm Reed. So, yeah, that's why I put him in. His significance. And spoiler alert, great, in season... when was this indie arc? Season 2, I want to say. That small probe gets sent to Earth as a test. And it wipes out a massive, who are folk from Florida called? Floridians?
Yes.
Sounds like something off the periodic table. But anyway, Floridians, this beam comes down and literally scores all the way up Florida to killing like 7 million people, including Trip's sister. So he's never quite the same. So he's part of a revenge arc as well. And he does these above and beyond the Call of Duty to try and stop the main probe coming to take out the planet full stop. And he's best friends pretty much with Jonathan Archer, the captain. You see them almost in a, like you would be, the way I'm with my boss at work, I don't call him boss, I don't salute, I call him mate.
You call him Trip, right?
Call him Trip, I love that. friendly terms, because they are childhood friends as well as Captain, and I think he's Lieutenant, is Frank, yeah. So you see them eating meat and stuff in front of T'Pol, and she's disgusted. And this is when they had the chefs that would cook them, because you know back then your
Right.
food wasn't coming from replicators.
Replicator.
It,
Yeah.
it was, but it was basic stuff. You wanted a decent feed, your chef brought you the good stuff. They're tucking into steaks and stuff. So Tucker, maybe that's where it came from. But anyway,
So wait a
so
minute now. They had replicators that could do like what a McDonald's hamburger, but if you wanted something better, they had to go what slaughter a cow on the ship itself or what?
I think
How did they get this?
they had so I don't know. I don't know. It's like you never see someone go to the toilet in Star Trek. It's the same thing. They have the replicators were good for basic stuff. You
Yeah.
couldn't put anything advanced in it because it would just taste awful. It was the very start of them, and people like proper cooking then. So literally, the chef would cook stuff, and then little a wall of just basically like trays or compartments, sorry, with meals in them that already been prepaid and preheated and nice and warm, and
Yeah.
you just pull what out you want and sit down in the
Kinda
galley
like the
and
vending
talk.
machine junk that the people eat today, like, "Oh, there's a sandwich."
Yeah, but obviously the food was really good. So I mean, this is it. This is what I love to see. People knock Enterprise, and maybe rightly so, but to see this raw Starfleet, this raw starship that didn't even have phasers at the start, it had torpedoes it literally had torpedoes that came out that looked like mini ICBMs right now, They didn't have the
Mm.
photon torpedoes until 2, 3 seasons in. The phasers came in later on, and that was the ship rushing through rushing through uh, the production of them that would normally take them many months at Jupiter Station to do, but they were getting chased by an enemy who was unknown who kept poking at them and taking shots. So they literally, Trip and Malcolm Reed came together, like, let's do this quicker. They done it in like a week, less than a week, few days.
A week.
And they literally were testing, they were phase cannons then at the start. So yeah, it was just very raw. He was the first major engineer of the first warp fire engine, and he deserves a special place, I think. And spoiler alert, he dies at the very end of the whole thing, which he's not happy of as an actor, but it's Star Trek. He could come back and did that. So
Well,
yeah, that's the
they knew the
choices.
season was ending, so they just killed him off.
Yeah, basically, yeah, which is a sad reason to do it, if you ask me. That should never be the reason, but
Yeah, if you're gonna
so
do it, you do it for a reason.
So yeah, we have
Yeah.
picked two. That's our ace up our sleeve, our wild card, if you like. The rest of them are the same, but we'll hopefully have maybe different reasons as to why we chose these guys. So in fourth place, Gray, who is your fourth best Starfleet engineer and why?
From Voyager, Belana Torres.
Tell me
In
things
fact,
about Lana.
I'm trying to remember, you might remember better than I, but on
Mhm.
Voyager, did she always start out as chief engineer or did she change?
She was
I think
brought
she
in. What was when the crews were combined? It was actually going to go to the other engineer. I can't remember his name, the actual Starfleet guy, but a way to actually combine the two crews together was obviously Chakotay would be number one, and then
right.
Jamie really wanted to give the position to, I can't remember the other engineer's name that she really liked, but Chakotay's like, give Balana a shot because she is really good engineer, but she was a hothead back then. It took her a while
Right.
to calm down, and she messed up, and Jamie was, I can't give you this job, like, you've messed up how many times at the start and you're hothead, but she sees something, she goes, right, okay, and it obviously turns out to be best decision
Right.
because the guy that she was going to be underneath is now underneath her, but they got on really well as a team in the gel and they work really good. Sorry to steal your thunder, Gray.
Which was interesting because they had a female captain, which is unusual then,
Yeah,
and a female chief engineer.
yeah,
So you already had two women in high positions, which is normal now, but back then, as far as TV is concerned, it wasn't as normal.
true,
Um,
true.
which is cool, I mean, and now we've kind of come full circle again because 7 of 9 just been made captain in Picard. So now
That's
we
true.
have not that we didn't have other female captains and admirals, and so you saw them here and there.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
if
yeah.
assuming legacy does become real, then it'll be cool seeing, 7 as captain, which would be nice, pretty neat.
I
But
always liked that engineer in sorry, I'll go completely sidetracked.
mhm.
Grain Discovery. It wasn't the chief engineer, that was Stamets, but it was the one, that famous actress, that the one with the really short hair. She looked like she was late 40s, 50s, really dry sense of humor, the one-liners. She
Oh,
was
right, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, yeah.
I loved her. She was just my cup
She
of
was an
tea.
engineer, but not chief
Yeah,
engineer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you
Yeah,
never
yeah, yeah.
seen main engineer in the bloody Discovery. It pissed me off. You always see the small room. What? Sorry.
Yeah, I would love just seeing her big chief engineer. I liked her. She was
Yeah.
one of the few characters on the show I liked.
Her and Scotty would have got
Her
that house in fire.
she was good even though she wasn't on all the time, and, of course, Doug Jones. So those are probably the top 2 because I don't know, just because they were just so good,
They were.
with the
They were.
material they were given.
So, Balana,
But B'Elanna
why?
was
Yeah.
cool. I mean, I liked her because she was a wee bit hot-headed here and there, but she knew her stuff, and she obviously, worked hard at her job and got Voyager out of jams and stuff, which is what a chief engineer is supposed to do,
Yeah. Yeah. Any
you know?
episodes or anything that stick out for you or anything you didn't like about Balana because no one's perfect?
No, I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen a lot of Voyager episodes. I can't say,
Mhm.
but I do know that seemed to fit rather well, and the whole crew or the camaraderie between the main crew were all good, and so
Yeah.
I really like that. And it was different too because you had to, these people were half Maquis and half not, and you didn't know if they were going to get along or they were going to have problems or they're going to have fights or they're going to have, and they really had to get along because they were lost out in the Delta Quadrant or
The big
whatever, and they
black.
were yeah, and they just said they had to do something, so they really came together. It was interesting how they all chose to just go with Starfleet as opposed to maybe somebody insisting, well, why don't we just all become Maquis?
That's a good point, actually. I never thought of that. Yeah. Well, because it's a Starfleet ship. That's what's
True,
probably edged it. And the
you knew which way it
captain,
was going to go.
and the captain is Starfleet's.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're right. Good point. It's like, yeah, why not Mackie? Our ship survived, and maybe it's bigger, just as big as Voyager. It wasn't, and
yeah,
maybe our captain is Chakotay. So, how about you join us, Jamie? You'd be number 2.
yeah. But that wasn't going to work.
Um,
I think the other good thing is Maquis had to fly by the seat of their pants all the time with their ships, so
yeah,
that probably gave you an up, or had B'Elanna was learned from all this and was able to be a better engineer. So all worked.
yeah. Um, no surprise, like I said before, I chose the same. It just the way it worked out. We tend to think most alike when it comes to Trek anyway, Grey Eyes, so it kind of makes
Mhm.
sense. Yeah, did pick Balana as well, and it's a bit fresh in my memory because, like I said before, Voyager is my favourite series of all of them. She does join at the start as really hot-headed engineer, but you could see her skill in getting shit done. Now,
Mm.
do you want to know something?
No, tell me.
I'm not going to change it now, but I should have made her third. I'll tell you why. This just came to mind. I just remembered this. She invented or was the main contributor to the is it this no, not the Slipstream, that's a different bloody franchise. The what is that technology they had where
Well, it
they
wasn't quantum drive. We know that.
no,
So
maybe it is. No, was it Slipstream, was it? Or I bloody
I
forget.
thought
It was the
I thought
episode
it
on
was
you go, Gray?
no. I said I thought it was Slipstream, right?
No, I'm sure that's a different sci-fi franchise.
Transwarp.
No,
Transwarp.
no, not Transwarp. It's the one where
No.
in season 5, they send the Delta Flyer ahead of Voyager, and it looks like warp drive, but it's got the kind of tunnel effect. And Voyager, the Delta Flyer has to send the commands back to Voyager to where it should navigate, but something goes wrong and it crashes just outside the Alpha Quadrant, and it gets frozen. It's called Frozen, I think. Actually, it's frozen under ice for ages. Then they go back in time, Chakotay and Kim, to try and stop it from happening. It's She invents that technology anyway, using benzamite crystals or something, but it was a one-shot kind of thing. And this was it looked more like Transwarp, I guess, but it used the warp engines kind of thing, and it just looked like
Mm.
extensions added onto the warp drive. She's responsible for that. So that is pretty massive, mate. And I kind of regret not making her third now, so I'm going to have to think of something really special for third, because that's not not many engineers, if any,
Okay,
have done that.
you can change it on the fly if you want. It's okay.
Nah, I won't because then I'll muck up. But yeah, no. So the, the top 3 and 4 are really important anyway. But yeah, so Lana really grows into her role, really grows into it. She chills out, relaxes her well. I don't know if she maybe gets a promotion at some point in Voyager as well. Um, and she really calms down when she also gets with Tom Paris and they have a family and whatnot, have a kid. And it's her half Klingon nature with her half human nature because she's both. And there's
Mm,
some brilliant episodes with her where she revisits her past, what it was like being brought up with mixed race parents, what it was like to be part of the Maquis because they do. If you remember, Greg, they do go in with several of the crew members of the Maquis storyline and the
yeah.
resistance and what it would. Tuvok creates a program. What would happen if they got together and they're fascinated by this program? Or maybe we should take back Voyager. They do that in a number of episodes, and they look back at another part of her skill set was she actually designed that missile. Remember that
Hmm.
missile that was the AI controlled? It was really smart, and it was to be used against the Federation, um, and or was it no? Was it against the Cardassians? It was against the Cardassians, and this is Cardassian probe, smart weapon. It found its way somehow into the Delta Quadrant, maybe the same way Voyager was sent in. And this
Hmm.
thing would literally, it was corrupted, so it would literally try and aim for these random planets and try and take them out and kill them. But she has to get on board and literally, Dreadnought is called, there we go. And she
Hmm.
has to try and deprogram this thing. She's having a conversation with this AI. It was really cool. That and the robot that they find out in space, literally, this looks like a stereotypical robot in this thing. It's murdering rampage and what it wants to do. B'Elanna trying to teach it right from wrong. So yeah, some cracking episodes to shine in. And like I say, maybe it is Slipstream. She invents that, so she deserves a special place, I think, for that. Can't say too many negative things for her. Maybe because she is a bit hot-headed, but that's down to genetics. So kind of don't blame her.
I'm sure some of it would be right.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's to be expected. So yeah, same fourth choice, but she maybe probably deserves to be third. But you know, our, we've we've said who they are. We've written them down, so we'll stick with that. We'll go with our top 3 now.
Yeah.
The really important guys. Gray, who did you go for in third place, and why?
Well, third place, we went with Miles O'Brien. And if you remember, Miles O'Brien started out on TNG,
Transporter
and
chief.
he wasn't the chief engineer. He was the transporter chief when he started over there. Um, so he went for this, however many, what was it? I think was it 5 seasons, and then he left because he went to Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
He wasn't there for the whole 7 seasons.
Yep.
So somewhere around the fifth season or whatever it was, he left and was sent to DS9. But when he was sent to DS9, he became chief engineer there.
Yep.
Um, and it's pretty big role because you're chief engineer of a whole station. So your station's a lot bigger than just one ship.
DS9's massive as well.
So that alone would be enough to give him third place here because he had to run around like a chicken without his head, probably. Like there's always something he had to go and fix or whatever. But Miles was always a cool character. Uh, he was always an interesting character. He was always getting involved with Worf when Worf came onto the Deep Space Nine afterwards, and as well as the rest of the cast and crew and stuff. So he was always an integral part of everything, and he was able to do a lot of different things. Also, when they finally did bring the Defiant on board the ship, he was instrumental in doing some things on the Defiant as well. If you really investigate canon, there were some other things I don't remember exactly, but that he's accredited for as well. Plus, they had to beef up the entire Deep Space Nine when Dominion War started, so he had a hand in all that stuff, all the new weapon systems and so forth. But he was a very likable character, though. It
He
just was
was.
that way. Cole Meany was the actor,
Yeah.
but and Cole went on to do some good stuff afterwards after Star Trek too. Um, but it was just the kind of character you just really gravitated to. And he got married on the Deep Space Nine, had a kid, all
Keiko.
this stuff. Keiko, and they had a lot of scenes of things of his life and how he interacted with everything. But he was in the line of chief engineers that were great and have done a lot of things.
Yeah,
They didn't mention his name in Picard though.
didn't, which is a shame. He deserved a place for that. So did Bob Picardo. But anyway,
Yeah,
that'll be
can't
another
make
one.
this can't get everybody.
Top Doctors and why. Miles O'Brien I chose as well. For similar reasons to Gray, but to expand on them. One thing Gray mentioned, and I'm glad you did, mate. I'm surprised I've forgotten this fact, considering how much I love the bloody Defiant. The Defiant, as we all know or knew, is a hothead of a starship, but much like the Blana Torres of starships, it would literally want to rip itself apart because there was so much power in such a small chassis that wasn't designed to be the way it was. It's your man, Chief Miles O'Brien, that actually tames the beast. He's the one that goes in and makes it safe to fly and fight and not tear itself apart. I wouldn't say it's 110% squeaky, efficient, clean starship, but he gets it to a point where it's actually usable. Because it wasn't usable before. That's why the whole Defiant program was kind of put on the chopping block for a while until they started to bring them out again. But yes, good point, Greg. Kudos to you for that one, mate. That is a big helping hand. Another thing he does, which is instrumental, or did he do this? Was he involved in the minefield outside the wormhole to stop the Dominion forces coming through, or did he leave?
I think so.
Or did he leave with the rest of Starfleet onto that space station with like Admiral Ross and Cisco and whatnot?
I don't remember.
I think he
had
was
something to do with
left
it.
behind though, wasn't he? I think he was left behind. He decided to stay. I might be wrong though, but I think he had a hand certainly in those mines that you couldn't blow them up because they were self-replicating. So if you took one
Mm.
out, well, first of all, they were cloaked, shielded,
Right.
and they had self-replicating technologies. So if you tried to fire on them and you blew up, it would just replicate itself really quickly and replace itself. So you were in. That's why they had to find a way of stopping this, taking this minefield down by stopping it at the source rather than, which was in Deep Space Nine, and that whole angle was fascinating because the Defiant lays down loads and rows and rows and rows of invisible self-replicating mines that the Dominion are stuck for ages. Otherwise, the station would have been overwhelmed. They would have got backup forces in no time at all. So credit has to go to that, and the guy has lasted. He's like Worf. He crosses over between two Star Trek series, which not many people have done. He was cool in The Next Generation, but he wasn't a season regular. He was just a guest appearances, a handful of guest appearances throughout the show. And then to be promoted to then go on to a space station, the most prominent, the most important at the time space station in Starfleet, because while it wasn't the one outside Earth, it was pretty far out. I mean, it was the border of, not in the border, it was pretty far out in the Alpha Quadrant, wasn't it? So this was almost like the last place you would visit, and you would see how many ships would you see docked to those famous pilots? Enterprise D, Voyager, Defiant, just to name a few. There's more.
Oh yeah, other class ships and stuff, and
Oh yeah,
Klingon ships as well. Yeah, we saw a bunch of things.
and as Gray mentioned, he beefed up at the very start. Actually, the Deep Space Nine is not by the Bajoran wormhole, and they have to get it there to try and protect it, so they can kind of claim it for their own, to protect the Bajoran people. And space stations are not designed to move; they don't have engines on them. So, Chief Miles O'Brien has the idea to put like a bubble around the space station to make it lighter. I know it's in space. Wait, what's that? But for whatever reason, it works. He puts it round to make it as light as it possibly can, uses the thrusters all synced together on one side, and literally moves the station along with an inch of its life of blowing up those bloody thrusters to get it near the space station, to get it near the wormhole. And he does. And, there's explosions going off, and can he take it, kind of captain, and too much power. But they get there, and
Or they'll fly into the wormhole, even better.
That would be hilarious. Gobble gone. Uh,
Oops.
Space station's now in the beta quadrant. So he is, and obviously beefing up the station later on because Deep Space Nine does have armaments, but the Cardassians done a number on that station when they left it, so they didn't leave very much. Chief Miles O'Brien, along with the help of Starfleet, upgrade it massively, Grey, because it literally could hold off a
Sure.
fleet. It does hold off a fleet more than one occasion throughout the seasons. Multiple phaser banks, phaser turrets, which we had never seen in a space station. We only really seen in Defiant.
Sure.
Uh, Multiple phaser rings, phaser rays. So many bloody torpedo turrets. My God, this thing was just
It
non-stop.
used to spin around almost like a
Yeah,
machine gun.
yeah, like a machine gun for photon torpedoes.
Yeah.
And there was so many of them. I think they say at one point, I don't recall the number, but literally there is hundreds, if not thousands, of torpedoes on the station. They've got the
Right.
space for it. Makes sense.
Sure they do. Sure.
So, Chief Miles O'Brien, you deserve your place there, mate. But if you don't come back in a special at some point in the future, I may have to move you down to fourth, mate. So, anyway, that's our third place there. Second place, Mr. Gray. Who did you pick and why? Is it anything to do with a recent card season 3? No?
No, not really. I think I picked Geordie LaForge because look, it's the second Star Trek series.
We got a colon leak!
You,
A colon leak! Sorry.
yeah,
Remember
you
that.
had to look at it. There was a lot of shoes to fill when they started TNG in the cast. Uh, None of the cast even felt like that they were going to uh, be as important as the TOS people. And there's even a famous story where Patrick Stewart was agent said, "Look, just sign the contract. That the show will be off the air in 6 months. You can't recreate or follow a
And they'll
legend. It
have to
won't
pay
work."
you off and...
Right, and then all of a sudden, of course, it's the exact opposite. The thing about Jordy though that was interesting though is that his first season, he wasn't an engineer. If you remember when he first started, he had the red shirt on, right? He had the red
Uh,
shirt on, but he was on the helm.
that's right. Who was the engineer
So,
then at the very start? Do you
I,
recall?
no, I don't
They
know.
don't really advertise it, do they?
No. So I don't remember whether he served the whole year at the helm or not, because they quickly figured this out and moved him into engineering,
Yep.
where he took on the gold color. Now it is kind of funny in TOS. Red was engineering, and then eventually red became security, and then gold became engineering. Whatever, they play with the colors. But the point is that he started out on the bridge, and he started out as being on the helm and piloting the starship, and then they kind of explain, I guess, more or less that he has a knack for being an engineer and whatever, and then they quickly move him into the
Uh,
chief engineer spot. They don't really say a lot about how he got that way or how he.
but
They
remember,
just kind of mention it, and then all of a sudden he's chief engineer.
remember Picard season 3? He did go back on the helm briefly before he
That's
sat in the
true.
chair, didn't he?
That's
So
true. Hmm. So and technically, a good engineer should be able to do a lot of different hats.
yes.
Um, but yeah, that is a good point. When he went back on there, reminiscent of when he first started. So eventually, he became chief engineer, and I think he's. We all know if you're a TNG fan, he's done many great things on TNG as chief engineer, and in canon, he's known as being way up there on the top, top of the class, so to speak. And of course, when you saw Picard season 3, you see that even though he's older and he's a Commodore, he's running the whole bloody museum of all these ships. So, engineer's dream, I get to sit there and be the chief engineer of every ship. That's at my museum. So, pretty cool. And of
Um,
course, his pet project was rebuilding the D. Like we would go out and rebuild a car or something. He's just like, yeah, I'll just rebuild the ship, the whole damn ship. Why not? So pretty cool.
what was it you said, Gray? It was a bit like the equivalent of today of someone having a car in their
Yeah,
garage that they just want to do up, but they don't really
yeah,
have cars in that future. So hold my beer. I'm just going to redo a Starship for the next couple of decades,
yeah.
and
That's all. Just the whole starship. Like, I really want to know how he was able to finagle some of the stuff. Like, well, bring the sausage section over here, and I guess he was allowed to get away with a lot of stuff being head of the museum. So
Yeah,
he could explain it away.
this is
But
true.
obviously, he did it in secret. Nobody knew he was rebuilding it. I mean,
No one did. It was a massive surprise and a massive job as well. Is there anything else you want to add to your point of view of Jordan before I jump
No, I
on,
think
Greg?
I
You,
think
you
he
can
was
tackle that.
LeVar Burton was a great actor to play the part, and he did an excellent job. A lot of people don't know that in the episodes he was on TNG, he had to wear that visor, and he said that when he had the visor on, he couldn't see, so he had to act as if he could see through it, but and deliver his lines. So that's pretty good to sit there and be an actor. You basically can't see much of anything with this thing on, and you still got to go for it. I mean, that's amazing because you can't see your fellow actors' faces or anything through that stupid thing. So, hats off to him. He did a great job and sold the part and did well. But he was definitely an important engineer in the whole series, the whole history of Trek. So,
Yes, yes, he was. I chose the same. Spoiler alert, because he definitely deserves that. He's cemented into second place, I think, for both of us. For
yeah,
obviously the reasons that Gray mentioned, but also I never remember the names of episodes. I'm bad for that for the most part, but I
yeah, I
do.
don't remember one either.
I could always just give you a description of an episode, and while I can't really think of many standout TNG episodes. There probably is. I'm not saying there isn't. I just think of things that come to mind are when he in Star Trek Insurrection, or was it earlier? When he gets his
Mm.
eyesight kind of back because the planet they're on starts regenerating his eyesight, um, and kind of doesn't want to keep that because he knows what it would mean to the inhabitants of the planet for him to keep that, and he feels he's looking at a sunrise with Picard, and he's like, you could see what it means to him to have his eyesight back. Um, but obviously in Star Trek Picard season 3, he has got implants in there so that, because like Gray said, he couldn't see through that bloody thing. But it's iconic to him. It really is iconic to him that he has that. So it would have been nice if you saw it as an Easter egg or something in season 3, but I don't recall seeing it.
Yeah, no,
But for me, I think he done a great job in Picard season 3 because he was Commodore at this stage, in charge of the Fleet Museum. A privileged position, and he's
hmm
responsible, I'd like to assume, for getting all those classic starships in place, getting the D rebuilt, putting it back in its place. And he's obviously a bit of a beef with Picard for a while because his family's he's got 2 daughters, they're involved, or at least one. Yeah, they're both involved in Starfleet, and he doesn't want them involved. But obviously they work things out and they become a great kind of team. And he sits in the captain's chair on the D for a little while Picard's on the cube doing his thing. Um,
yeah,
but for me, that guy deserves a massive amount of respect because he becomes the chief engineer of the flagship of the Federation.
sure.
Fat Boy herself, old Enterprise D, the biggest starship of its time at the time, and he's responsible for this. Although he's got one blip, not his fault, but he's got one blip on his resume, Gray, and that is he let the bloody Duras sisters get a hold of the bloody shield frequency for Enterprise D, and then kablooey, put some bloody holes through it, didn't they?
Yep,
Well
I remember that.
done, Geordie.
That was kind of goofy for that movie
No,
too. It just it
it's,
didn't make enough sense.
it
I
didn't.
mean, it wasn't one of the better parts of a Star Trek movie. Put it that way.
It wasn't. It really wasn't. Oh, by the way, yeah, I kind of was right. Remember the technology I was talking about that B'Elanna invented or helped invent? Slipstream
Mhm.
isn't a title. The quantum slipstream drive.
Oh, okay. So I said quantum drive, but I didn't know there was a quantum
There we
slipstream.
go. I
Yeah,
knew it was something like that. Yeah, yeah. That was that.
yeah.
That was. She's hip. She then, when they get back to Earth, they use the research and stuff to. It's a
Okay.
thing. It is a thing in Star Trek now, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
Maybe good because warp drives are canon system. So, and it's practical, unlike bloody spore drives. So
Well, they did say that a lot of the technology that came back with the Voyager was then used for ships going forward in the Dominion War and other things going
Yeah,
on because they needed to resist the Borg, and Voyager had been able to figure out ways to do it. So that made a lot of difference when they went to build the Enterprise E and other ships of that class because they were better able to resist the Borg. And that technology all came from Voyager. So
yeah, yeah. This is it.
there you go.
As Captain Seven now said at the time. He went when Jack asked about Voyager. He's like, this one here has been far. It made her adventures far further out than any of those old relics. I think Gray took offence to that, but a relic doesn't mean it's shit.
No,
It
no,
just
no.
means it's old, and they are old. So yes, that's why the Voyager's got a special place. It was a legendary ship like them, but it done it further out than any ship's ever been. Technically
Well,
not
it was
true.
also amazing that it lasted
And
because
the bit of
everybody figured
technology it brought
it.
back, it was a first for Starfleet. It was
Yeah. And to last that long without getting blown up was
the
pretty
amount
good
of
too.
the amount of torpedoes they went through and bloody shuttlecraft they went through and story plot purposes. Yeah. So John of the Forge for us, very iconic engineer, and rightly deserves his second place. But no surprise that first choice for Gray and I is Jankum Pog. No, I'm joking. It's
No.
not. It's not. Gray, who's your number one and why?
No, no, you have to do this because you're Scottish, so there you go. Go ahead. Who's your pick?
Okay. And you can chip in. Scotty. Scotty, played by the amazing, famous James Doohan. Gray interviewed him, and we can
Hmm.
link that below after. It was a nice chat. Gray basically got on with him like a house on fire. He's very friendly, chatty, talkative guy, and he divulged a decent amount of information to Gray. And I say I will link it below, but he talks about where he got the accent from his character. Um, he was literally, it was a blank canvas. They were saying to him, how do you want this guy to be? And, what nationality should he be? And he's pretty decent at doing accents, James. So he went with
Yeah.
Scottish because despite being a Canadian, living in America, playing a Scotsman, he decided to go with Scottish because they make great engineers. And I didn't know that was a thing. I guess they did, and they kind of still do as part of the British Armed Forces. I don't know, but he went with that, and he does a pretty decent accent. I don't think anyone nails a
Yeah.
Scottish accent bang on because it's a hard one to do, but he does it justice. He does it proud. Um, for me, the number one line, Gray. I can't remember what episode or what movie it was in. I think it must have been when he came back in TNG and he was speaking to
The
Geordie.
computer.
Yeah, and they were talking about how long did you tell him to get this fixed? And he said such and such. And he's like, oh, what? You're supposed to overpromise. How do you have this line of being a miracle worker if you give him the
You
exact
tell them the
same
real
thing?
time. Yeah.
I mean, chip
That
in
was
there.
great.
We'll go to and fro. Like, great, it shouldn't just be me, then you. But, I'm guessing you just like him because of what he's achieved and legendary status he has.
Well, I mean, he was the first, as far as TOS is
Yeah,
concerned that we've ever seen.
yeah.
He played the part really well. He was a really great actor, and he was a linguist, so he could do many different accents. People don't know. Um, but when I first met him long ago, I was just shocked at when he was talking because he talks like I do with a completely American accent, and I'm just like, I mean, it was almost like Scotty just forgot the Scottish accent all of a sudden,
He
and
is
he just
Canadian, by the
talking.
way, so let's not offend too
Yeah,
many Canadians out
I
there.
know. And so as he started telling me the story, like you said, about as far as in his mind, that, he felt that the Scottish made great engineers, and he even named some of them. I don't remember. And he told me, he said, so that's what I went with, and they they said, fine, whatever you want. So he just went with that one, and the rest is like history. But there's so much stuff in canon,
Oh, yeah.
Star Trek canon, and even non-canon, where Scotty is in a special place all by himself, and so many different innovations that he did. Not and this is also in canon, not just back in the original Enterprise, but when he uh put himself into the transporter buffer, and survived 79 years or 80
Genius.
years, whatever it was. And then TNG finds him. Even at that point, Geordi was he couldn't believe it. He said, "There's nobody would ever even attempt to do something like that." And he just thought quick on his feet and decided to get whatever crewmen were still alive into the
Breaking how
buffer.
many
Someone will
protocols and procedures?
sure, and just somebody that would find him, and it was just bloody brilliant. And he ends up surviving, and they get his pattern out, and he comes back in the TNG era. And then there is canon and books written about how Scotty from that point started making things better even in another century. So not only did he accomplish amazing things for Starfleet in the TOS era, but then again in the TNG era as well. So
Yeah.
the guy was just like pretty prolific. So it was great just seeing somebody that revered. And when you hear the name Scotty, it's just kind of like whoa, what?
It's synonymous of Starfleet engineer.
Yeah.
Realize, you know.
And people of that role where they've done a lot in their career, like we saw in Picard season 3, we see uh Captain nope, forgot his name all of a sudden. The
And what Star Trek?
Picard season 3, where Geordi comes face to face with the captain of the Titan, and he's totally in
Shaw.
awe of Geordi.
Shaw.
Shaw, yeah, Captain Shaw. He's
Who
totally
is
in
an
awe.
engineer by trade.
Exactly. So it was just like meeting, almost God, and he's just sitting there just going, ah, bah, 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 bah." And it's the same thing. Geordi was real impressed when he met uh, Scotty for the first time, thinking like I'm never gonna meet Scotty. He's dead. He's been gone. And when he was there, it's just kind of like, whoa, the guy from the original Enterprise, et cetera. Wow. So
At first, he's
it's
pissed off of them, though, isn't he? Because he's not acting the way that engineers and Starfleet officers do of that generation. Pun not intended. But he learns to love him by the end and appreciate and take on his words of wisdom. And they're
yeah.
pals
I think what it was is he Geordi was stuck in what he knows in the 21st century, and
by
so
the
he wasn't
book.
giving right. He wasn't giving Scotty his due because Scotty was a fish out of water a little bit
Didn't have a clue.
with some of the technology, but he
Yep.
caught on fast, obviously. And again, there's books out there where Scotty, made amazing things happen in the 24th century as well.
Yep.
But same thing though, he was revered, and everybody on the ship was just like, it's start next generation was just going like, Scotty, what? And they're all just like, how? Yeah, I mean, we actually have him. He's actually alive, and everybody was like, oh, Scotty.
That's pretty good. Hey, let's not forget, Gray, that um, he was he what he gives the recipe the formula for
Yeah,
transparent. I'm going
aluminum,
to say aluminum because that's what they say in the movie.
aluminium.
I would say aluminium, but to be fair, I'm quoting Star Trek, so transparent aluminum. And that movie was hilarious because your moments of
Eh,
yeah, I just remember him picking up the mouse and going, "Hello, computer." You know, how quaint. Just use the keyboard, and he gives they're trying to build the fish tank for the whale, and they need something strong enough, but they don't have anything in that modern time. So he types into the keyboard the recipes that'll make this warehouse owner guy rich. If you can give us the materials for free, and he types it in, and Bones is like, "What? You're going to like? What do you like break the universe? Like you can't do that kind of stuff, you know? Like how you know?" Scotty says, "How do you know he wasn't the guy that invents it?" And
he created it anyway.
the two of them have some great banter, Bones and Scotty. That he's like, okay, yeah. So, little scenes like that, and I know you're going to hate me for saying this, Gray, but it's obviously not the favored version of him. But Simon Pegg plays him in the Kelvin verse movies,
Right.
and you can't compare them. But see if you stand the performances separately on their own, Simon Pegg does a pretty decent job. His accent is
Yeah.
actually more accurate, which might disappoint
Yeah.
some people. And the reason being is his wife's Glaswegian, from Glasgow on the west coast of the country, where I'm from. So living with someone like that, you're bound to know the accent a bit better. And he does a
Mhm.
good job. That his version of Scotty invents the long distance transporter. If you recall those movies at all, Gray, I know you tried to
Mhm.
burn them out your memory, but they could
Yeah.
only at that stage beam down to say a planet, and at one stage he actually invents the long distance transporter to actually, and it's Leonard Nimoy Spock that actually tells him that he's the guy that invents it and gives him a nudge so that he's on that planet miles. This is the first time you see that Scotty. He's in miles away with that little cute creature sidekick guy of his, and he invents this to literally beam someone. I mean, I don't know how far it was across a system, like nuts, light years upon light years away. So let's not forget that. And this is a grey area, but he had a
Gray area.
hand. Exactly. Too much grey. He has a hand, if not the guy, that invented at least an initial failed or not to be investigated enough version of transwarp drive.
Mm.
Remember, right?
Oh yeah, well yeah.
He's on the well, I don't know, was it Excelsior or was it Excelsior class? I don't remember the
Right.
actual
He's the
name
one.
of the
He
ship.
went. It was I think it was either Search for Spock or the next one where
That's just Spock.
they had to steal the
Yep.
Enterprise to go on this mission, and so Scotty went on to the Excelsior, although you didn't see him physically go on, and
Sabotage.
he messed things up and took some stuff
He's
out, and
got
then the
bolts. He's
Excelsior.
got proper bolts as if it's
I
a
know he's got
car or
stuff in
something.
his hands. Everybody took out of it, and he's going like, "See," and then you see the Excelsior try to go into transwarp, and it goes bah, like this.
And the noise it
Can't do
makes like
anything.
a car breaking down, which is not
Yeah, yeah.
practical, but I didn't care. It was
No, goofy
hilarious.
but funny. Yeah,
It was.
and and only Scotty could get away with this stuff because it's kind of it's I think the cool thing about Scotty was that he was like far smarter than anybody who first meets him would think,
Oh yeah.
and he didn't like to flaunt it. He never really flaunted it, but when something needed to get done, he would always know what to do and how to do it, and just kind of like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm the miracle worker. I'll make shit happen,
He has all the
and he
classic
did.
lines. He has all the classic lines as well that made him so
Mhm.
famous. I want the Enterprise, no bloody A, B, C, or D up there, and
Yeah.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain, and just the In fact, Simon Pegg does a great version of that as well, but can't compare to James's version. It's
Mhm.
just bloody brilliant. And remember, was it Star Trek Six: Undiscovered Country, where I don't know if he'd been drinking or tired or whatever or both. He's walking along and he's like, I know this ship like the back of my hands. Don't right off the
And he hits
bulkhead,
his head.
hits
Yeah.
his head and passes out. I watched that so many times first time. I'm pissing myself laughing watching that.
I really
Um,
liked, there's a bunch of episodes, well, not a bunch, but they did have a couple episodes where they centered on Scotty and TOS. A couple of good ones, actually.
oh yeah, when
But
he's drinking with people.
there was one where he had to sit down and drink with this, I think it was a Klingon, one of the Klingons that looked human. That's another story. But the point is that he had to keep him occupied.
Yeah.
And so Scotty just goes to Kirk or whatever and just goes like, "'Cause I know what to do." And he grabs this bottle of like whiskey or whatever it was.
Proper whiskey, not synthahol.
Exactly, and he goes in there and he just starts drinking with the guy, and the scene was hilarious because you see Scotty getting drunker and drunker, and he's just like, "Rrr." And this guy doesn't seem like he's getting drunk at all, and Scotty's kind of like, this, what's going on, man? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, the last minute, the guy stands up, and then it just hits him like all at
Oh,
once, the
that
entire
was so
bottle, and he
funny.
just goes, "Yeah,
That
boom,"
was
and he
so
hits the ground.
funny.
And he goes, and he's sitting there making comments about it. And he's like spinning around. It was great. That was one of the best scenes they ever did. It was great.
Yeah.
Really, really good. And there was other several things too. And I think it was Wolf on the Fold, um, where he had a love interest and everything, which was kind of neat.
Yeah.
In fact, hold on.
Oh, we got here, people. He's got a love interest.
This is this is a script. Star Trek Wolf on the Fold, right?
You've got a
Okay.
script. You kept this from me.
I was like, that. It's not. It is a copy of the actual
Ah,
script,
okay, okay, okay.
not his his pitch.
Right.
So inside, if you look right here, and this is for people on YouTube. Sorry, you see
Yeah.
James's autograph right there,
Wow.
and you also see George Takei's autograph as well. So the engineer Scotty signed my script, and this was an episode that he was prominently featured in. So obviously, I want him to sign that.
Oh yeah, of course.
So
Respect.
yeah, but he
Nice.
he was around. He was the first, and chronologically now, I guess if you want to go backwards, whoever's on Strange New Worlds was preceded Scotty. But the point is we didn't know that at the time.
An enterprise. Yeah, of
Right,
course.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So
chronological isn't important to a lot of people, Gray. It isn't to me. I only mentioned Trip because it was the first Warp 5
right,
engine, which is
right.
a because there's probably people around about his time before or after that were in charge of the first Warp 1, 2 engines. But first Warp 5 was where you could get shit done. You could go places without it
Yeah,
taking a ridiculous amount of time. So, um,
sure.
and that was, yeah. So, I mean, we could go on and on and talk even longer about Scotty because he was such a famous character, such a comedian.
Hmm.
The guy James himself, like he served in World War Two. He had
Hmm.
like a finger taken away. He had so many injuries. For the guy to then go into acting and pull this off is immense. To come back in TNG, immense. And then when he passed away, rest in peace, James. He then get his ashes taken up to space, and first person
Hmm.
to ever have their ashes put into space. So James will ever, Scotty will forever be the best engineer in our hearts and a proper trekker because he is where no man, no person, apologies, has gone before, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool, mate. Pretty cool, I think, and he
yeah.
deserves his place. Uh,
It was funny when you mentioned about the missing finger that it was injured in World War II.
hmm?
They went a long way during the course of shooting the original series and even the movies where you never saw that.
Why?
You
They should
never
have
saw.
just said that. You could wrote in something to say why you lost
Well,
it.
yeah, but
Why hide it?
back then in TOS, they didn't want to show handicapped people. They
It's
didn't want to
enough.
show a lot of different things. They were able to get away with a lot of stuff back then.
Yeah.
Remember, it was the late '60s, but they didn't want to do certain things. So you didn't really show anybody that was handicapped. Now today it's quite accepted, of
Yeah.
course. In fact, it's even more accepted in some ways. If you go back even further, just a quick history lesson, but if you go back to the '40s in the U.S., there was a president, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, during World War II. Right? He had polio and he was crippled and he couldn't walk. But whenever they used news footage of him, they never ever showed him trying to get to walk to the stand to make a speech or whatever the case may be. And rarely do you ever see footage of that because back then they felt that if you showed a handicapped person that they would think less of you. And this is all BS and we knew it's BS later on, but this is how they believed.
Yeah.
So like some of that carried over unfortunately. But in any case, it was funny because when I first met Jimmy, I had only heard little stories. I didn't really get into it. And then he started telling me, he says, "Yeah, see, and finger's gone." And he said, "Yeah, World War II." And he said, I forgot how he
Right.
said he actually lost it. I don't remember.
What was his
Um,
rank again in the Canadian Royal, whatever the hell it
yeah,
was?
I don't remember. I don't know if he was captain or what, but he had a couple ranks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Impressive.
but there's some pictures of him out there that I think I put a picture in when we did the interview
Which I will
of
link
him
below. Yeah,
when he entered in. Yeah, and it was just like, wow, talk about a young looking, because they were only kids then. And stuff. But yeah, he was a cool guy though. He was funny because when we were in the car with him, I got him a gig where he was going from radio station to radio station doing quick interviews, and I went along with him because I'm the one who arranged the thing, and so I got to go to all the stations with him.
yeah.
And he would in the car, and he started going into his linguistic thing. So he started doing all these accents that were just great. He
Really
was doing Scottish accent. He did like at least 5 different English accents. And
different
he was
regions within England as well. That's
oh
hard to
yeah,
do,
oh
man.
yeah.
Wow.
And he would even explain to you, well, the Cockney da 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 has a, whatever this and this, and you have to say it like this. And he goes, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like,
Where did they learn this from? Did they ever say?
some people that are in linguistics that can do this have a natural talent. It's like
Maybe he
really
did that in
weird.
the army. Maybe he had time in his hands in the armed
Maybe.
forces.
I don't know. I mean, nowadays, linguistics that are hired for movies and stuff like that really know their stuff. I mean, look at the guy that created the Klingon language. It's an actual language. I mean, it's not an actual language in terms of we don't go running around speaking it,
No,
but
but
it is a real language that
it is
had to be
classed as an
built.
official language, mate. It is.
Right.
There's
So you
enough.
can learn it,
Yeah,
ever since that when they did stuff like that, nowadays you see a lot of science fiction movies where they're actually speaking whatever alien language, right?
yeah,
Well, they always hire a linguistic to make the language appear to be real.
yeah.
So it's no more made up stuff anymore. It's got some basis of structure to it. So it actually seems like a real, real language. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But when he went into all these accents, we were just cracking up. We couldn't believe it. And then he would just talk normal, and it was just like a Canadian slash American accent, like,
Not
like
a North American accent. For the untrained ear, a
yeah,
lot of Canadians may sound similar to America just because of how close they are. But
yeah.
I guess he worked in Hollywood for a long time, so his Canadian accent may have dulled a little bit. To be fair, um, but yeah, that is Scotty, first choice, top ranked engineer of all time in Starfleet, and I can't quite right from Grey now. Couple of cheeky, funny little honourable mentions after for
hmm
just touching it for a couple of minutes. Gray, who did you got a kind of special shout out to?
Yeah, I kind of shout out Hammer from Strange New Worlds because even though he was only there for a short time because the character died, he was really cool, and he developed a special, little place in people's hearts that watch that series, which shows how much better that series was than a lot of the others, of the new track. And so we were all sad when the character died, and he did a good job. So I thought, he deserves it.
Mhm.
Um, of course, I mentioned Jankum Pog just for the heck of it. That was Star Trek Prodigy. I don't really take that one too seriously. I mean, because Jankum Pog's a very strange character. One second he's supposedly really smart, the next second he's like not so smart, or I don't know, or pretty juvenile. And I don't know. So, but I figured out, it's there, so you might as well mention it. And then, Trev, you go ahead with yours, which were
Yeah,
similar, and then you
I
added one.
I did one at the end after just because it was a good shout. So Hemmer, yes, as well because he was only there for one season, but he was a very dry-witted guy, and I love that. I got on with guys like that. Just his humor was brilliant. And thing
Yeah,
is, the actor that played him is actually blind. It's not the Andorians. It's the like the smaller
it's
planet beside. Remember?
it's an offshoot of the Andorians.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
can't remember the.
we don't remember the name. But yeah, they
Yeah.
are all blind by nature. They're all born blind, so they use all their other senses to compensate. To the extent that he's actually probably better at seeing,
Right.
getting around and knowing and doing things than people with eyesight. But very Daredevil-esque, actually, because he
Yeah,
hones all
yeah.
the other sites, senses to be as good as he is. And he is a bloody good engineer. You see the things he does in that first season. Gutted he
hmm
died. They should have kept him for longer. I'd like to know the reason why they
Yeah.
killed him off. If they have a good reason, fine. If you killed off someone for the sake of it, I'm not happy with that. Jankum
Well,
Pog.
it made sense in the story, but I can't remember the actor's name that played Hammer right now, but
Oh,
he is returning in the second season, but not as Hammer. He's returning as another character, another alien character.
okay, hey, I'll take that.
So,
I'll
I
take
think
that.
they liked the actor so much that they felt like they had to see if they could try to make some other
Yeah,
thing for
and
him.
and maybe it was only a season long contract. Maybe they didn't know how successful it would be, which is fine. But tell us that. But yeah, I picked up Jankum Pog too. Now, yes, it's an animated show. It's a kid show, but we can't use that as a stigma. It is what it is, mate. So we have to treat it for what it is. And yeah, Jankum Pog sometimes. I know what you're coming from, mate. He does seem like sometimes he's a dum dum, but I think that's just because he's a Tellarite, isn't he? So I think sometimes they can be a bit like that. Plus,
Mm,
he's maybe not like me. He's probably not the best with words, but he has got the smarts up here. The things he does in those two seasons, especially the last season of Prodigy, were brilliant. Like he's literally
yeah,
learns to rebuild and repair the protostar drive, which is no mean feat considering he didn't know anything about it before, and he gets people at fixes. So I think he deserves an honourable mention there. And then I put in a cheeky shout to Rutherford from Lord X because this is the thing. It's against him and it's not fair. The chief engineer is Billups, the dodgy like porn star Tash from the 70s, this kind of number. You probably had, he still does actually. So he is that, and you don't see him very much because he's bridge crew, and it's not about bridge crew; it's about lower decks.
yeah,
But Rutherford is an engineer, and he's a bloody good engineer. I mean, he could be running that department. I generally think because that Billups guy was a pain in the arse. If you ask me, I didn't like him. But Rutherford, I did. He was genius. This guy.
yeah.
You had the implant in there, and it kind of supercharged his brain and whatnot. There was a whole story and angle behind that. But he was a proper engineer in terms of he was very geeky, very technically astute and aware.
Mhm.
And he helped the lower decks get out of many a jam, actually. So, special mention to him. The engineer is the heartbeat of any starship, and no starship would be the same. Starship's the number one most important character on a Star Trek show. So without an engineer, top class engineer, it's nothing. So, but
Yep.
yeah,
And
um,
there's one really good reason for that, because the ship's not there. They're all dead, so it doesn't work.
this is true.
Just a side joke, but but yeah, I mean, to us, it always, if you didn't have a proper ship, it didn't work.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why the Enterprise, when you throw a name on a ship, you got to, there's usually some history behind it. And that's the same as today, and as it's carried forward in the future when we see these
Don't say it.
shows,
Don't say it. Don't.
you know.
Just
Well,
G's
I don't say
the
anything.
G's band. Don't talk about that. Don't.
It's
Don't.
growing on us.
Don't.
It's not that bad. Well, first of all,
If they say there's an overhaul, that's fine. But they didn't. Terry, you let us down.
they
Stupid
will.
dum dum.
Terry will make up for it. Watch, you see. When Legacy comes around one day, which
Well,
could be years from now, but
if they don't get Legacy, mate, and he missed his chance to say that that is state of the art, he's made an arse of
yeah,
that.
but you know
Then
what they do? They just write a book and call it canon, and there it is.
no, books are not canon. We know they're beta canon. That's the whole point.
They'll fix it. They'll fix it. Don't worry about it. I know what you're saying. I get it. They'll fix it.
It's just a
You
little
also got,
usual moans.
well, there is something else you could think about in a way. Um, the Enterprise really didn't make a phenomenal history until, I mean, even though there was the first Enterprise in the series Enterprise. Okay, so it had some history behind it being one of the first ships off the production line, so to speak. Okay, fine. But generally speaking, history is made by the ship and its crew. So history was really, in my mind, was really made on the name Enterprise when TOS came out,
Hmm?
because you had Pike and the history that he laid down, you had Kirk and the history he laid down, so it became a synonymous name with historic ship and a lot of awe in people. Now, because if you really think about it, Enterprise B didn't have much of a career, right? It gets destroyed
Yeah,
like
but we know
on
why they done
on
that. They had to jump forward in time, so that was something that had
no,
to happen.
agreed. But in canon, Enterprise didn't really have much of a history, and it died on what
Yeah,
was, I think it was a Maiden
B and
cruise.
C didn't do a lot, so that's fine.
Exactly. So you had the Enterprise name, you had a history to live up to, but you can't always predict whether you're going to live up to that name or not. And unfortunately, those two ships didn't. But then when the D came along and the E, now you're making
So
history again.
what you're saying, Gray, is if they get Legacy, then by the end of the first season, the G might not actually have. It might have the kind of fleeting appearance that the Enterprise B and C had, so that it gets blown up at the end of the season or really quickly at the start, and they replace it with the H, and that's how the adventures go. I'm happy with that. Yeah, I'll take that
No,
on
no.
that
What
bombshell.
what I'm saying is that two things should be done. Number one, above all, is as you and I just said, and they have to explain that it's a refit and it's a hell of a lot better than it was before. That's really important.
Yeah, it's a
So that
given.
should be done no matter what. Now, assuming that that's done and it is a much better ship, now it needs to go out and make its own history, just
Yes,
like the other
agreed.
ships.
Agreed, mate.
And then you would hope it
5-year
makes its
mission.
own. Right, exactly. So you would hope that they have their, their time to shine, when and if we see the series and so forth. And we hope to see that. Unfortunately, it still hasn't been given any kind of pre-production or green light. Also, because of the writer's strike as we record this
You're
show,
not seeing it anytime soon.
it could be, yeah, and
2025
unfortunately
at the
not.
earliest.
Yeah, I mean, just with Star Trek, let alone anything else that might be your favorite thing.
Yeah.
If the strike goes on 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, it pushes production way down.
Yeah.
So we're not going to, unfortunately, not going to. If we had hoped to see Legacy in 2024, which is what we were playing with, yeah, okay, 2025,
Well,
26. So
tune in
you know,
next week for Gray's Green Room, because hopefully we'll talk a little bit about the whole Paramount Plus thing and the streaming services and the way they're going, because they're losing a lot of money, and that's all to do with the amount of Star
yep.
Trek shows that they're showing, because they're not cheap to make them and they're cutting them down. So Yeah, we're gonna have to wrap up there, Greg, because we've been going
Yep.
on for
Yep.
a while, and I need to go and get my din-dins. But yeah, listen, thank you again. It's our specials are just something a bit different. We get to talk about Trek and be
Yep.
a bit
And
passionate and a bit geeky. But if you have any ideas of what you would like us to talk about in Star Trek, no idea is a bad idea. Write them below, and a cheeky little thumbs up, and we know what you like and what you don't like, or a dislike if you don't like it. We'll come
and we'll be
back
back with another special of
exactly.
some manner. We
I,
we
I,
have lots of ideas. We just don't know which one we want to do.
if you can't give us a good suggestion, people, then Gray's going to pick one for us. I'm putting him on the spot, one that he likes from our list. We have a list, you see. So, but yeah, okay, we'll wrap up there. Thank you again for all your patience and your time. We'll see you again next week. And until then, Gray, do your thing, my man.
Live long and prosper, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.